morning and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look around Dover Castle, which is one of my favourite places. It's an English heritage site, so please join me and hope you enjoy the walk around. As you can see from here, from reception, you can go on various pathways. We'll take the pathway towards the main castle, and as we do that I'll give you a bit more information on the history of the castle, and again, hope you enjoy. Dover Castle commands the Straits of Dover, the shortest sea crossing between England and continental Europe, a position of strategic importance throughout history. Castle Hill was shaped into massive defences capped with medieval walls and towers, and later from the mid-18th century by the earthworks of a garrisoned infantry and artillery fortress. Beneath the surface, cut into the chalk of the North Downs, are a network of tunnels which enable the garrisons to move, plan and live in safety. King Henry II began to build the present castle in the 1180s, and over the next 800 years its buildings, defences and tunnels were adapted to meet the changing demands of warfare right into the era of nuclear weapons. In 1066, William the Conqueror came to Dover after the Battle of Hastings to capture the port. He had established a fortification possibly around the church, but there was no surviving remains. The castle was extended in the 12th century, although we know nothing of its appearance before the Great Rebuilding of the 1180s. The castle that's visible today was established by Henry II in 1154 to 1189. In the decade 1179 to 1189, he spent lavishly creating at Dover the most advanced castle design in Europe. His engineer Morris built the inner bailey and towers, part of the outer bailey and the huge centrepiece. The immense Great Tower, a sophisticated building that combined defence with a palatial residence. One important reason for this rebuilding may have been the new pilgrimage route to St Thomas Becket's shrine in Canterbury. With no substantial properties in Kent, Henry needed a magnificent and impressive setting in which to receive and accommodate important visitors making the journey. In 1204, King John lost the Duchy of Normandy to the French King Philip II, resulting in enemy territory just across the Channel. This prompted more expenditure at Dover, furthering the design of Henry II in order the wall and the towers and the royal accommodation in the inner bailey. If you hear some heavy breathing from me, forgive me, these are quite steep steps into the castle. As you come on top of the first flight of stairs, with a open area and a small chapel with an altar stone and a beautiful stained glass window. This was the castle that resisted determined sieges in 1216 and 1217 during the First Barons' War. When King John fought against the coalition of English barons and Prince Louis, heir to the French throne, the castle garrison led by Hubert de Burgh repulsed all attempts to take the castle, though the barbican and main gates at the northern end were severely damaged. When war ended in 1217, the building resumed for Henry III. The vulnerable north gate was blocked solid and replaced by two more, and the main one at the Constable's Gate on the west side also a residence for the castle constable, and a secondary one, Fitzwilliam Gate, on the east. The builders remade the barbican and cut a tunnel under the outer wall to reach it via the new St John's Tower that dominated the outer ditch, and a covered passage across it. The passage continued as a tunnel under the spur, where it divided into three, allowing defenders to defend the barbican. Building continued sporadically under Henry III into the middle of the 13th century. By this time the castle had reached a peak of development as one of the largest and most sophisticated castles in Europe. It included a royal residential complex lining the walls of the Inner Bailey. In 1265 the castle was besieged again, with Eleanor de Montfort in residence after the death of her husband at the Battle of Evesham during the Second Barons' War. There was a short siege at Dover, ended by negotiations with Eleanor and her nephew, the Lord Edward, son of Henry III. From the 1260s, the constable of the castle was Lord Warden of Scenic Ports and the royal officer charged with the oversight of the semi-independent Scenic Ports. To ensure their service to the Crown, this is one factor which ensured that Dover remained of importance in the medieval period. The late medieval and Tudor castle and the Stuart decline. There is only a scant knowledge of the castle in the late Middle Ages until the reign of Edward IV, when the Great Tower was remodelled as an occasional residence. This reflected Dover's location on the route to Flanders, which was ruled by the Duke of Burgundy, an important ally. Dover remained important under the Tudors, and especially with Henry VIII, who built the artillery forts in Dover and along the south coast in 1539 to 1540. The Holy Roman Emperor Charles V came to the castle in 1522 and met Henry there at the start of the 6-week diplomatic visit. The Great Tower's royal apartments were refurbished to receive Anne of Cleves on her way to marry Henry in 1539. Elizabeth I visited in 1573 and ensured the castle was kept in good repair during the war with Spain and in the final 2 decades of the century. Royalty last used the castle in 1625 when the Great Tower received a makeover for the French Princess Henrietta Maria on her way to marry Charles I. Thereafter, the King's favourite, the Duke of Buckingham, made alterations in the Great Tower and to some buildings in the Inner Bailey. It's an interesting little place behind the Great Halls, down a little corridor. As you turn left here, there's a few steps down into a kind of gallery, small seating area, and a small chapel in front where services were carried out. I believe this was for Henry II. You'll see in a minute as we pan around, we go up into a kind of another little ante-room behind the chapel, if not in front of the chapel. Henry II apparently used to sit there and observe the services going on in the chapel, so anyone entering the services had to walk down if you like to the chapel, and he could see that from his raised location, and being a king obviously he always wants to be raised from his subjects. As an interesting little add-on to the chapel is this window here that overlooks the entrance to the castle up the steps, so I suppose there's no surprise who's coming into the castle when you're in the chapel praying, etc. As we pan round to the right and up these small stairs you can see there, we'll drop into the back room where Henry II used to sit and watch the service and see the people obviously coming into the chapel area itself. The window straight in front now is where Henry II used to sit. The castle was neglected, playing no significant role during the civil wars of 1642 to 1645. The Great Tower was used as a prison for the French and Spanish prisoners during the 9-Year War 1688 to 1697 and the War of the Spanish Succession 1701 to 1714, and the graffiti can be seen on the walls today. Georgian Revival. The 1740s marked a new beginning as Britain emerged as a world power and came into conflict with its rival France in 1744 to 1745. A failed French invasion and a Jacobite uprising prompted improvements to the nation's defences. Works to the decaying buildings created a barracks in the Inner Bailey and the Great Tower, and new barracks were erected in 1756 to 1757. The combined barracks accommodated 800 infantrymen, an unusually large concentration for the time, indicating the importance of Dover. Simultaneously, military engineers recognised the weakness of the spur as being vulnerable to bombardment by cannon from higher ground to the northeast. The Barbican was remodelled as an infantry strongpoint, while the outer wall of the castle on the northeast side was reduced in height and backed by earth to help absorb incoming cannon shot. 2 new positions for the cannons defending the castle were built at a bow battery and 4-gun battery. The greatest modifications to the castle since Henry II occurred during the French Revolutionary and Napoleon Wars of 1792 to 1802 and 1803 to 1815, concentrated mainly in 1794 to 1799. The military engineer Major William Twiss and Captain William Ford comprehensively altered the defences, most dramatically where the entire eastern outer wall was cut down and backed by an earth rampart for cannons. The outer ditch was then enlarged and lined with a near vertical brick walls. 3 huge earthwork bastions projected from these new defences, mounting cannons to fire along the eastern flanks and served by the tunnels from the castle interior. The engineers also modernised the spur to allow a staged defence back across the inner ditch through St John's Tower and via the medieval tunnel to the Outer Bailey. The new works included underground barracks and casemates at the south sides of the castle and above ground at the east casemates and spur casemates. A new entrance was made at Cannon's Gate on the southwest, and 2 earthwork bastions flanked the western outer wall. Inside the castle, the engineers built a new gunpowder magazines and equipped the Great Tower as a vast store for gunpowder, shot and other military supplies. When war ended in 1815, Dover Castle was a formidable artillery fortress and barracks. The 19th century. After 1815, there were nationwide reductions in military expenditure. At Dover Castle, the army vacated many of its barracks, including the underground casemates, which were used in 1818 to 1828 by an anti-smuggling force, the Coast Blockade. However, by the late 1840s, the nation's defences were in a perilous condition, and improvements slowly followed in 1853. The Inner Bailey and the Great Tower were strengthened. This was followed by magnificent officers' new barracks in 1856, which were designed by Anthony Salvin, and better buildings for the soldiery, including the Regimental Institute in 1868 and the Garrison School in 1870. From 1865, the building of a new fortress, Fort Burgoyne, to the north was a final acknowledgement of the weakness of the spur, but the castle found a new role in coast defence, with 4 groups of large guns. These large guns were capable of firing far out to sea against the new threat of steam-driven, ironclad warships. The First World War. When Britain declared war on Germany on the 4th of August 1914, Dover Harbour became the home of the Royal Navy's Dover Patrol to defend the Dover Strait, particularly against German submarines, and to protect communications for the army in France and Flanders. Dover had a garrison of around 16,000 troops, with the castle as headquarters to defend the perimeter, occupying the high ground around the town for up to 1.5 miles distance. Within the perimeter were many training camps for soldiers destined for the Western Front. The harbour approaches were defended by coast defence guns, while the new threat from airships and airplanes was addressed by anti-aircraft guns, including two near St Mary in Castro entry to the harbour, and regulated a control building, the Fire Command Post, established in 1905. The Port War Signal Station 1914 survives in Dover Castle with a commanding view over the channel. The Second World War. In 1939, Dover resumed its former role when war came again. The castle as headquarters, but for the army garrison defending the town and for the re-establishment of the Royal Navy base. The empty underground casemates were recommissioned as bomb-proof officers for a Vice Admiral in charge of the naval base, and as headquarters for the army units coordinating coast artillery, and anti-aircraft defences for the units defending Dover Fortress. These commands expanded throughout the war as Dover became the nearest town to enemy-occupied territory. In June 1940, Vice Admiral Ramsey's naval headquarters played a central role in the Operation Dynamo, with the evacuation of 338,226 British and Allied troops from Dunkirk.
Right, let's take a look at the kitchen. I feel sorry for the kitchen staff running up and down the stairs to feed the Walshy, etc. That's a shame. You used to be able to get down and have a closer look, but they've sealed it off now. But I'd say it gives you some idea on how the kitchen was used to be laid out and worked in. Big copper pots over there. We used to sit on, or cauldrons, what we like to call them, the copper anyway. Sit on top of the fire. Here I believe we've got a bread oven. That's where all the baking was done. In there. And that's really the tour of the castle itself. So let's take on a look at the inner walls. Another gatehouse there on the opposite side. Right, let's take a look at the Prince of Wales Royal Regiment and Queen's Regiment Museum. So if you want to stop there at any point and just look at the different regiments. So please feel free just to pause and take a look at the information here on the various wars over the years.
Two new levels of tunnels were built. The old ones were now called casemate levels. The first, called Annex, was completed early in 1942 as a small hospital. The second was called Dumpy, opened in 1943 as a combined operations centre with provisions for large-scale communication transmissions. The latter played a significant role in Operation Neptune, the naval side of the plan for D-Day, and also in a successful deception operation known as Fortitude South, which convinced the Germans that the main invasion of Europe would be in the Calais area and not Normandy, and that it would be launched from Dover area. The Cold War. The army vacated the castle in 1958 except for the Constable's Gate, which remained as a senior officer's residence until 2015. In the early 1960s, the government selected Dover Castle as one of the 12 regional seats of government to be occupied in the event of a nuclear war. It was to be in the charge of a senior minister with a military and civilian staff tasked with creating some of the administration after nuclear attacks.
Interpretation of the soldiers in the trenches during the First World War. of grenades there. Machine gun. There's a Nazi flag. Some Nazi weapons, SS, helmets and caps, and there's a Luger, German gun. And that was a brief tour of the Regiment Museum. This is a room showing the Great Tower story. It was built by Henry II.
Iron Age hill fort, Roman lighthouse, Anglo-Saxon church. The origin of the settlement on Castle Hill, where Dover Castle stands, may be the pre-Roman Iron Age. The irregular shape and the massive enclosed area of the castle earthworks are not typically medieval, more closely reassembling a hill fort. In southern England, hill forts were built from about 500 BC until the Roman invasion, variously as places of permanent habitation or a refuge. Slight evidence of occupation in the 1st century BC was found during excavations in 1962 near the castle church of St Mary in Castro. 70 years after the Roman invasion, in AD 43, construction of a fort began at the mouth of River Dower. This was Dubris, a fort for the Classis Britannica, a Roman fleet that patrolled the eastern channel. Though building stopped suddenly, it began again around AD 130 and the fort was completed. The Romans built an octagonal tower-like lighthouse on Castle Hill around the same time, with another on the opposite hill, the Western Heights. These lighthouses supported fire beacons to act as navigation lights for ships approaching a narrow river mouth, enabling them to find quayside outside the fort. The fort at Dubris was demolished around AD 215 and a new one constructed around AD 270, which may have continued in use along with the lighthouse into the 5th century. The Church of St Mary in Castro dates to around AD 1000. Its exceptional size hints that it might have been a royal patron. Goodwin Earl of Wessex, Father King Harold, 1066, is one possibility. A cemetery discovered during archaeological excavations in 1962 indicated that a community lived nearby, perhaps in the fortified burh.
Various coats of arms. There goes a little bit about the ancient church, restored in the 18th century. This is the bell that's cast in 1639. A blocked Saxon doorway. I thought it might be a Saxon church. Quite beautiful. This reserved for private prayer. Got its own altar. Beautiful stained glass window there. I've never been into a church where there's tiled inlay. Yeah, definitely tiles. I don't know whether that was a past addition to the building, although it does look original. Beautiful stained glass window there, you can see. It's all very vivid colours. It's very unusual. It's the arches, etc., in the wall. And there's a view down the inside of the church from the altar. I think it's probably still very much a military church. Well, that stained glass window is a Roman. So that was a small look around of St Mary in Castro. Ancient church, served military community.
I want to thank you for joining me today on this look around at Dover Castle. It's a really nice morning. I hope you enjoyed the castle, the church and the lighthouse, etc. There are lots more to see at Dover. You've got the tunnels, which are well worth looking around when you get the time. Maybe we'll do a video one day on those, but thank you very much for joining me. Please subscribe to the channel, like and comment, and I'll see you again on the next one. Thanks again. Goodbye.